As most of the fans of this channel know, I'm an absolute Thrawn fanatic, and so are many of you. I've written fan fiction about Thrawn, which is all throughout this channel. The Thrawn trilogy was the first Star Wars novels I'd ever read when I was very young, and ever since then there's been no better villain than Thrawn, not counting Vader and Palpatine themselves. This will be a spoiler-free review of the latest Thrawn book, Thrawn Alliances, and I will be making a spoiler-loaded review later. Let me just say first that I read, or rather listened to, the audio version which I got from Audible, but I wish I'd went ahead and gotten the actual book instead. The audio version is not simply read, but voice acted, with music, and a lot of sound effects. I found the sound effects and some of the music very distracting. I know what a blaster bolt sounds like, and I know what footfalls sound like, etc., and maybe this is a little bit hypocritical because a lot of the fan fiction I have on this channel has all of that stuff, but it's carefully chosen and timed. It is done keeping in mind that there are no words to describe the sounds, as I'm already playing those sounds for you. The Star Wars music bits were from the original score by John Williams, but at many times it just didn't fit right. There was a battle scene involving battle droids, for example, set during the Clone Wars era, and I heard a variant of the Imperial March track, a score only appropriate to Vader or the Empire. There are several more examples of this mismatched music throughout the audio novel. The voice acting for Thrawn I would score as a 9 out of 10. To me, it was indistinguishable, or possibly the same voice actor used in Star Wars Rebels, who did a fantastic job. My only issue is that I think it should have been an octave lower. And granted, no one can put as much menace into their voice as Vader, as played by James Earl Jones. Thrawn's voice makes him seem a little unintimidating by comparison. The voice acting for Vader and most of the other characters was fair, but for Anakin Skywalker it seemed forced. It made Anakin sound like a bit of an idiot. Now let's get into the actual story. This isn't much of a spoiler, but the story does pick up right after the Battle of Atollon as seen in Rebels, and Thrawn and Vader are immediately put together on a mission for the Emperor. At the same time, the story is told when Thrawn and Anakin Skywalker first met. I won't be alone in saying that I much prefer the later storyline to the earlier one. Most Star Wars fans don't find Anakin anywhere near as interesting as Darth Vader. I found myself repeatedly disappointed when the story left the Vader and Thrawn plot to cover the Anakin and Thrawn plot, and then reinvigorated when we get back to the so-called present. Although Thrawn himself is interesting, I care little to nothing at all about Anakin, as we already know his ultimate fate. We know there is nothing that can happen to him in that timeline that will be comparable to what he will go through later in life. Which brings up another minor complaint that I just thought of. Thrawn in the past is pretty much a clone of Thrawn in the present. He's just as clever, cold, and calculating. Maybe I'm missing it, but I get no sense of character progression at all. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised if he came out of the womb at birth saying, "How interesting. The architecture of this room denotes a sense of covetousness and protection." In fact, by now I find myself having to suspend my belief about Thrawn's mental powers. I find I am speculating about how in the hell Thrawn could be so genius. Most geniuses we know are kind of deficient in other areas such as social graces or physical abilities, but Thrawn has all of those things. I speculate that Thrawn may actually be hundreds of years old to have the time necessary to discipline his mind in such a way, or perhaps the Chiss have a warrior order of their own along the lines of the Jedi, Shaolin monks, or Knights Templar, or something like that. Anyway, Zahn has a wonderful habit of writing intricate detail to set up some dynamic and interesting action, and this story is no exception. This has the advantage of not being mediocre or stupid at all, but it has the disadvantage of being overly complex in certain situations, requiring the need to go back and replay or reread to understand the details. But, for better or for worse, you can just ignore all the intricacy until the scene gets to the climax, and then you will find that all that intricate detail is compartmentalized to only that scene, and has little bearing on the overall plot. But even if you do miss something important, one of the characters will eventually explain it in plain language in some dialogue later on. So how about the interaction between Thrawn and Vader? I'd say it was fair, nothing unexpected. and what the fans would want. I cannot get into it too much without spoilers, but the relationship between Vader and Thrawn, well, it's complicated. Are they a match? Well, yes, absolutely, but in different ways. There is a lot I have to say about this, but I'll get into that in another video. We do learn a lot about the nature of the unknown regions in this story, and we learn a few new and interesting things about the Chiss. This gets me back to a bit of Thrawn's believability. The story does make one ask if all Chiss are like Thrawn, or if Thrawn is an anomaly. There is nothing in this story that answers this, but I tend to believe the latter, that Thrawn is an exception, even among his people. The only real problem I have with this story is that there are 2, maybe 3 protagonists, and no strong antagonist or villain. Granted, this is true of Zahn's last Thrawn story, but what made Zahn's first Star Wars book so great were the villains. Sadly, this is lacking here. And finally, the conclusion of this story was left wide open for sequels. Don't expect to find a lot of answers in this one. The answers you get will invoke more questions. In conclusion, this story about the interactions between Thrawn and Vader had to happen eventually, and Zahn delivered. This was not his best or most original work by any means, but the interplay between Vader and Thrawn was what made it noteworthy. My only fear is that we lose the mystery of Thrawn. I said before that questions were raised, but that mostly refers to the Chiss ascendancy in the unknown regions. Thrawn himself is starting to develop a predictable pattern. He needs an element of something to throw us off.